The scripture reading before the lesson this evening will be from Mark 1, verses 40 through 44. Mark 1, 40 through 44. And a leper came to Jesus, beseeching him and falling on his knees before him, and saying, If you are willing, you can make me clean. Moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, and said to him, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately the leprosy left him, and he was cleansed. And he sternly warned him, and immediately sent him away. And he said to him, See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priests, and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded, as a testimony to them.
Well, good evening. It's great to see everyone out tonight. Some for the second time, some for the first. But regardless, it's great to see you. Another opportunity to open up God's Word and to look at His Word and hopefully gain something from it and apply it to our lives. The story that Ty just read there in Mark chapter 1 is the story we're going to be looking at tonight. It's also mentioned in Matthew and in Luke, and we'll look in Matthew specifically here in a few moments. But just how awesome of a story that is. That this leper here is going to go to Jesus seeking this healing, and that this healing is going to happen immediately. And we're going to turn to Matthew chapter 8. If you would go ahead and turn there. We're going to look and just read that account of this same story together. Some similar thoughts with it. So Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 through 4. They say, When Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. And a man with leprosy came to him and bowed down before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Jesus reached out with his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, See that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the priest, present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Very, very similar to exactly what Ty just read, but a different account, different words used there. But I want to look at this story and break down parts of Jesus, parts of the leper in this quite short story, 4 or 5 verses, depending on the account, and take some things and hopefully apply it to our lives. First, with the point being behind me, is that seeing the need of healing. This leper, if we're not aware, with the old law, especially with leprosy, there's very clear where the lepers are supposed to be, right? Be outside of the camp, to not be near the clean people. And Leviticus 13 and 14 are examples of those chapters where it's, in this situation, this needs to be done. In this situation, this needs to be done. Very clear on that and what needs to be done. And so for this leper, first off, to be running up to Jesus, with Jesus being a clean man, is first and foremost not something that should be done based on the old law. We can see that. If you look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 1, and one of the main reasons I wanted to read this account was the fact that Jesus is coming down from the mountain with large crowds following him. So this isn't just Jesus, this isn't just his apostles, but this is large crowds of people following him. And this man, this leper, is going to run up to Jesus and bow down before him, and is going to ask him to heal him. And so we see, based on that old law, he should not have been near Jesus. But the big point that I want to see from this is that nothing was going to get in his way of healing. You can see that he's clearly heard who Jesus is. He has heard that Jesus is able to do these things, hence why he runs up to Jesus and not just some random guy. Right? He knows there's something special about this Jesus Christ, and I'm going to go run up to him and ask him to heal me. The faith that we see of the leper here is truly amazing, that no man is going to stand in his way, regardless of how many people were around. He wasn't worried about the opinion of other people. He wasn't worried about what the old law may have said. He was focused on the healing, was his main focus and objective there. And the question, kind of an application for that, is do we do the same? Are we the same when we see the need of healing? Are we the ones that are going to run to it and run to be healed? Or do we worry about the opinions or outside things of this world? And I'd say that's a tougher question and a situation that I'm sure we'd like to say yes to, but oftentimes the answer may be no. The answer to that question is that we go out and we worry about the opinions of people. I may lose my friends because of me changing my lifestyle to follow Christ, or I'm not going to be able to partake in these activities because I'm going to follow Christ, or whatever type of activity or idea you may want to use to fit that illustration. It's that this leper, and the application for us is that we need to understand that nothing can stand in our way of being cleansed, and the focus of that, of getting rid of this leprosy, this sin. We're going to look at those kind of interchangeably tonight in application of that. But I also want to look at the fact that we are the leper, like in this story as well. We all need healing. Romans 3:23 is very clear about that. Just one verse, the popular verse, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And it's we all have in need of this healing at one point or another. Certainly, baptism being necessary. Scriptures are very clear about that. And obviously, repentance being a part of that as well. The illustration that's been used often in the pulpit up here is kind of this idea of if sin was leprosy. This idea if I had sin and I could physically see it on myself, the idea that there would be baptism all the time. There would be constant repentance all the time because I can see it, right? And that would really bother me and motivate me to want to get rid of this ailment that I have on my body. But obviously, as we know, we can't physically see sin on us, but we certainly all carry it around. We all have sin. There's always that need of repentance and of baptism if that step hasn't been taken. And that's really one of the first steps, is identifying the fact that we all need healing. It's not, just one person, or you're not alone in that. We all have fallen short of the glory of God. We all need the grace. We all needed Jesus Christ, and we all need this healing. If you would turn to Isaiah 30, just to continue on the point here. Isaiah chapter 30. Here, the people, the Israelites here, people of Judah, are going to be going down to Egypt, and they're going to be looking for refuge, for aid there from them. We'll just go ahead and read verses 1 through 3. It says, "Woe to the rebellious children, declares the Lord, who execute a plan, but not mine, make an alliance, but not of my spirit, or to add sin to sin, who proceed to go down to Egypt without consulting me, to take refuge in the safety of Pharaoh, and to seek shelter in the shadow of Egypt. Therefore the safety of Pharaoh will be your shame, and the shelter in your shadow of Egypt will be your humiliation." So these people here are going to decide that they diagnose this problem, and that what they're going to do is, instead of changing from this sinful way that they've been living, as it adds in end of verse 1, they're going to add sin to sin. They have continually been living in sin, and now they're just going to go and continue in this sin. Instead of going to God, they're going to go to Egypt, is what we see here. And so with that first step of us understanding that we all have sinned, comes the where are we going to go with it? Where's that source of healing going to be? And so to kind of go back to Matthew 8, is it going to be going to Jesus? To look at it in Isaiah 30, are we going to be going to Egypt, or are we going to be going to God? That illustration, that idea of where we're going to go with this healing. Because again, like we said, we all need it. But it's this deciding factor of where are we going to go to receive it, to receive the healing that is there. And then the next part there is seeking the healing like the leper did. As we read in Matthew and in Luke's account, we'll talk about this as well, that he'll fall on his face begging Jesus for this healing. And that imagery of that is, it's not just walking up and just like a casual conversation, but it's this bowing down and begging. It really reminds me of the parable of Luke 18, where it talks about the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, where the Pharisee is talking about how great he is in his prayer, and the tax collector views himself as not worthy to even look up to heaven during this prayer. And I think that's just a really powerful idea of him bowing down, understanding who is in front of him, who Jesus is, and what Jesus can do for him, and that honor, that respect that we need to do. It's not, running up to Jesus for us in application, running to God and saying, fix my problem, friend, just a casual, normal relationship, and then, I'm going to go back and do my own thing. But it's going to him with that close relationship, that focus, to turn away from what we've been living in and to live for Christ is very, very important. And then moving along, right, is with the fact that we couldn't get rid of this leprosy or sin alone in the application, again, looking from both sides. That this leper, if he could have got rid of his leprosy by himself, he would not have gone up to Jesus, because there was no need for him to go get this healing if there's nothing to heal, right? And so for the same thing, we were not able to receive this ability to have our sins forgiven. Romans 5:6 will talk about that we were helpless, but at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. That there was nothing we could do, but that Christ came and did it for us. Just as there was nothing the leper could do, but Christ was the one that healed him and gave him this ability to be cleansed from his leprosy. And so that's what I want to see from this first point. We understand the need of healing. There's not a person in this building that hasn't or doesn't need healing, right? We all need healing. We all make mistakes. And there's certainly the step of baptism that we can talk about, and repentance from those actions and doing those things. Next point I want to look at here is the fact that Jesus is willing. When I read this story, if you want to turn back to Matthew chapter 8, when I read this story the first time, and looking at verse 2, when the leper says, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." The way I took that was that he was almost saying it in a doubtful manner. This idea of, like, I don't know if you can, but if you are able to, you can do it. And that's at least the way I read it at first. And upon looking at it more, talking over it, I think it's more so the idea of faith that we can see. That it's like, I know you are willing to do, I know you are able to do this if you are willing. And I think that's the big key, is that Jesus didn't have to be willing to do this. He didn't have to heal him. He could have said, you shouldn't be up here next to all these people. You shouldn't be up here next to me, bringing up the old law. But what Jesus says is, I am willing to be cleansed. And moving on to that is that Jesus is always willing to cleanse us of our sins. There's not a moment in time that Jesus isn't willing to cleanse us. And that phrase of what Jesus says in verse 3, I am willing to be cleansed, is certainly applicable all the time. Mark 1, verse 41 that we read in the scripture reading, will talk about that he was moved with compassion. Jesus was moved with compassion. And I really think that's just that phrase that we see a few times with Jesus, of him being moved with compassion, and just compassion being brought up with Jesus, is a whole other sermon in and of itself. But how powerful that is, that he doesn't have to help this man, but this man, he sees that this leper is wanting help, is striving this healing, and that Jesus is going to be willing to cleanse him, having that compassion on him. Because compassion is a choice. It's not something that Jesus was forced to do, just like all these things that he did. He wasn't forced to come down to this earth, forced to do any of these things, but he chose to do it. Compassion is a choice, choosing to do that. And he chose to be compassionate towards this man who was helpless, couldn't do anything to get rid of this leprosy, but he did decide to be compassionate and cleanse him of it. And that's kind of a real applicable thing for us today. Some other verses, Psalm 9, if you want to turn over there, Psalm 9, verses 9 and 10. The fact of that we need to seek him, and when we seek him, he's going to cleanse us. This isn't the idea of, when we seek a physical person out in the world, or we seek someone to help us physically, and maybe, I have this obligation that I have committed to, or I have to sleep, quite frankly, or whatever it may be, get some rest, have this event. But it's that if you seek him at any hour, at any moment that you are given, that he's going to and is willing to cleanse you of your sin. So Psalm 9, verses 9 and 10 will say, the Lord will also be a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble, and those who know your name will put trust in you. For you, Lord, have not abandoned those who seek you. And the main thing I want to focus on with that is that last part of the verse 10, that he's not going to abandon those who seek you. That if we are going to go and look for the healing, God's not going to say, no, not today, right? Or no, you're not ready. This is something that he wants this done, right? He sent his son to die for you, as we'll go ahead and talk about here in just a moment. But that's what he wants, is this healing for you. 1 John chapter 1, verse 9 will talk about that if we are willing to confess our sins, if we're willing to acknowledge the problem of our unrighteousness, that our sin, to fit the application of the story, our leprosy is going to be taken away. It's going to be cleansed. And the certain power that we see, that we need to address the problem, certainly, address that we have been unclean. The leper didn't, address that he had this leprosy, and so because of that, the motivation is I need to go and find healing. And that's what he did. And it's the same thing for us as people, that we need healing, we need Jesus, and that Jesus come and done this for us. And that he was even willing to take your place on the cross. Another verse that's very popular in Romans 6:23 would talk about, for the wages of sin is death. That's just the first part of that verse. But that's what we have earned, is this death, this spiritual death, that this thing that we could not get ourselves out of, but that he was willing to do this, that he was going to have compassion on us as he did the leper, to go and to die for us. Philippians 2 has some, just the way of phrasing it that I'd like to bring up in verse 5 through 8. It'll say, have this attitude in yourself, which also is in Christ Jesus, who as he already existed in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a bondservant, and being born in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by being obedient to the point of death on a cross. So here in this chapter, it's this putting others above yourself, this value on others above yourself. And this attitude was certainly in Jesus Christ. That he comes to this earth, that even though he existed in the form of God, as it says in verse 6, doesn't consider that equality. He's going to become this physical form that we are in, and is going to die on the cross for us, and by being obedient to death, even death on a cross. And how awesome that is, that his unselfishness, his compassion, leading to us having that opportunity to be cleansed, and his willingness to do that. Not a forced thing, not Jesus, you're going to go do this as a robot, and it's just, there's no emotion there. He felt emotion. We certainly see that on the cross. We see it when he was tempted by Satan. We see in other places where he feels compassion, other various emotions that he feels. And then he goes through all these things that we went through, that we go through. Didn't have to do it, but he was willing to do that. Just as he was willing to cleanse this leper, he is very willing to cleanse you and to cleanse me as well. And like just said, that he was willing to die for us. 1 Peter 2:22 through 24 will talk about that he was insulted, he suffered on the cross, he faced all these things, but he died to sin so we could live to righteousness, is what those verses will talk about. And that last phrase there, really, of dying to sin and living to righteousness, so that we can live through him, is really, really powerful. And he went through this death so that we could live, as other places will talk about it, and how powerful that is, that he would do that for us. That this wasn't just, a normal life of no trial. You want to say, not that every life has trial, but I'm saying this idea of it just went through casually, everything was all great, but he didn't do that. This was trial. There was sin that was against him. Not he didn't commit sin, but there was things that happened against him, and opposition that happened against him, and he standed firm and followed God. And how he's not just willing to forgive us, he's willing to come down and to die for us. His willingness to do that is truly powerful. And moving to the other point here, and I think maybe what might be the most effective or impactful point to me, is this, that he touches the leper. Back to Matthew 8, in verse 3, where he says, Jesus reached out with his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing, be cleansed. Jesus could have just said, I'm willing, be cleansed, right? Could have just used his words, didn't have to touch him, right? As again, you're not supposed to touch people with leprosy. But the old law is pretty clear about that, right? Not supposed to be near them. So that's red flag number one, if you will. Leprosy is also very contagious, right? So that's also a thing to see there. And I think it almost kind of reminded me in preparation of this, of kind of when COVID was in at full swing. We finally had started coming back to the building, and we were sitting kind of in our rows we were sitting in, and someone would cough, and you kind of look at them a little funny, right? Because they were like, hey, what are you doing, right? What are you bringing in here? And so it's kind of that idea of, well, he's getting close to that illness we don't really know much about, or we don't really know what to do or how to treat it. And that's kind of the same thing, I think, here, that what I thought of, But Jesus is going to touch this very unclean, sick, and contagious man. And the whole reason behind that is because Jesus touches the situations no one else would. No one else is going to touch this guy, right? Be near this guy. It's very clear what can happen to those that are that around leprosy. Again, very contagious. And so Jesus touches these situations that no one else would touch. I mean, this leper comes up to Jesus with this problem that we've looked at. I mean, it has isolated him. You look at the suffering that the leper has gone through. Certainly the isolation, being away from friends, being away from family, because of almost similar to quarantine, right? Kind of the idea for us, back to that COVID idea, that we, being separated, being away from your friends, your family, your loved ones, and certainly the difficulty of having leprosy, the pain there. And Jesus, again, doesn't just say be clean, but it's that I'm going to touch this man. This is a situation that I'm going to touch. That no situation is too far for me to cleanse, and that he is willing to cleanse you. Romans 5, if you would turn there, alluded to it earlier. I just want to go ahead and read verses 6 through 10, if you would turn there. If we can get more pages moving, that'd be great. Romans 5, 6 through 10 says, "For while we were still helpless, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will hardly die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person someone would even dare to die. But God demonstrates his own love toward us, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life." You look at the imagery used here, that he was going to touch the helpless, that he is going to, for his enemies, this application of we wouldn't necessarily want to go and touch these situations, be around our enemies, be around these ones that are against us, that are opposition to us. And it's the power there that he is willing to do that. He's willing to die for his enemies, and that he is willing to touch these situations that no one else would. To be around these people. I mean, we see the idea of who he's around while on this earth isn't hanging around with all these people that have great status, but is hanging, eating with the people viewed as sinners, tax collectors, and the sinners there, and other people that he has called to be his apostles. The stories there, the situations that he touches is amazing that we see, and it's regardless of the situation as well. I think, I know I've done this in my life, where we can look at our own situation, our own sin, and think of this idea that God wouldn't forgive me. That's certainly something that I had to fight in my life. I've been so caught up in this sin that there's no way that God would forgive me. There's no way that he would, if he knew what I had done, he wouldn't forgive me. And we can take that and we can come up to, and what Jesus is saying in the midst of all of that, in the midst of that feeling, is I am willing, be cleansed. I am willing to cleanse you of that situation, regardless of how far you think you have gone or what sin you've committed, whatever you like to put on it, that Jesus is willing to cleanse you regardless of all of that, and how powerful that is. In 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11, verses 9 and 10, we'll talk about this. We'll be listing these sins. In verse 11, we'll talk about this, that some of these people that he is writing to were caught up in these sins as well. And so it's regardless of the situation, the sin you may be caught up in, that he's not just willing to cleanse you from a distance, right? But he wants to have this close relationship with you. This isn't, I want to cleanse you and I'll kind of be, do my own thing and walk away and, good luck, Jacob. It's, I want to be with you. I want to help you get through this life, and how powerful that is for Christ, that he wants to do that, to be right next to us, to be with us. Kind of some verses to support that idea. 1 Peter 2:21. In the context there, we'll talk about you serving those who may be treating you good, serving those who may be treating you bad, and we are able to follow in his steps, because certainly we see that Jesus treated all people in the proper way, regardless of how they treated him, and that we are able to follow in his steps. Or Colossians 2, verse 6, it's called to walk in him, to walk like Christ. And that chance of, if you want to flip over a page or two to Romans 8, where in verse 17, it's that he has done this, set this example, that he has given us the ability to be cleansed, gone through these things that we go through, and that then we can be, as verse 17 says, heirs also, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ. So he doesn't just cleanse you and, I'll see you later, or, I'll walk with you a little bit of the way. It's I'm going to cleanse you and you're going to be a fellow heir with me. That you are an enemy of mine, as we looked at just a few chapters ago, because of the sin that you chose to commit. But now, because of the cleansing that I'm offering you, that you can be a fellow heir with Christ. And how awesome that is that we have that opportunity to have Christ, to be in our life, that he wants to cleanse us, which is something we did not earn, as we know, but he decided to cleanse us, to give us that opportunity to be cleansed. And we have that opportunity this evening. There may be those here tonight that have this leprosy, this sin, again, using that illustration, and may keep running to a source that is a source of healing, or a source that they think is actually going to heal them, when in reality, it's just going to be adding sin to sin, like we saw in Isaiah 30, verse 1. Just continuing on that road. And John 14:6 will talk about when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but through me. It's that he is the way, and to fit our illustration tonight, he is the way of healing. The only way we can find this healing of our sins, and to receive this true refuge, this true sanctuary that we have through him. There may also be those here tonight that don't know where to go for healing. Again, John 14:6 is applicable to that question, but certainly if there are questions tonight, there's opportunity for that to be answered. And lastly, though, there may be those who don't want to follow that process. Thinking of another leper, when we think of Naaman back in 2 Kings, if he didn't want to dip in the Jordan River the first time, that was below him, didn't want to do that. And eventually he is going to do that. And it's that this is the plan that's been offered to you, that you have this opportunity to be cleansed as I do. And Jesus has done all the things necessary, but it is still our choice on if we are going to accept the plan, accept what he has done for us, or if we're going to choose our own way. So at this time, though, I'd like to ask, what's stopping you from being cleansed? Is it a person? Is it the opinion of others? Is it just whatever situation it may be? I could list on and on. But don't let it stand in your way, because we have this moment now, and whatever it may be, if it's questions now, if it's questions later, if it's prayers, if it's the step of baptism, starting your relationship with God, that opportunity is certainly available now. But if you may need anything, please come forward as you stand and sing.